Kay had already spent some time half asleep, and now his slumbers were disturbed again. Why all this, he asked himself. Why all this? From beneath his lowered eyelids he observed Bürgel, not as an official who was discussing difficult questions with him, but simply as something that kept him from sleeping, and he couldn't see any other point to him. Bürgel, however, given over entirely to his own train of thought, smiled as if he had just succeeded in leading Kay slightly astray. However, he was ready to set him right again. Nor, he said, can one call those complaints entirely justified either. Just like that. Nocturnal hearings are not exactly stipulated anywhere. No one is breaking any regulation in trying to avoid them. But the circumstances, the excessive amount of work, the way in which the officials in the castle work, the difficulty of getting hold of them, the regulation saying that hearings of members of the public may be held only after the rest of an investigation has been entirely concluded, but must then be held at once. All this and more has made the nocturnal hearings an unavoidable necessity. However, if they have become a necessity, as I say, then that is also, or at least indirectly, as a result of the regulations. And finding fault with the nature of nocturnal hearings would then be almost... Mind you, I am exaggerating slightly, so that, as it is an exaggeration, I may voice it, would then be most to find fault with the regulations. On the other hand, it may be allowed that the secretaries seek to secure themselves as best they can within the regulations against the nocturnal hearings and their disadvantages, although those may be only apparent. And to a very great extent, they do secure themselves. They admit only subjects of negotiation which allow as little as possible to be feared in that respect. They test themselves closely before the negotiations, and if the result of the testing demands it even at the last minute, they withdraw any agreement. They reinforce their authority by frequently summoning a member of the public 10 times before really considering his case. They like to be represented by colleagues who are unqualified to deal with the case concerned and can thus handle it more easily. They at least hold their negotiations at the beginning or end of the night and avoid the middle hours. There are plenty of such measures. They do not let anyone get the better of them easily. Those secretaries, they are almost as tough as they are sensitive. Kay was asleep, but it was not real sleep. He could hear what Bürgel was saying, perhaps better than during his early period of wakeful exhaustion. Word after word came to his ear, but his troublesome consciousness was gone, He felt free. Bürgel no longer had a hold on him. He just sometimes made his way towards Bürgel. He was not yet deeply immersed in slumber, but he had taken the plunge, and no one was going to rob him of that now. He felt as if he had won a great victory, as if a company had gathered to celebrate it, and he or someone else was raising a glass of champagne in honor of that victory. And so that everyone would know what it was about, the struggle and the victory were repeated all over again. Or perhaps not repeated. Perhaps they were only now taking place, but had been celebrated earlier. And because, luckily, the outcome was certain, there was constant celebration. Kay was fighting a naked secretary who greatly resembled the statue of a Greek god, and who was getting the worst of it. It was very comical, and Kay smiled slightly in his sleep to see the secretary's proud bearing upset again and again by Kay's advance, so that he had, for instance, to use his outstretched arm and clenched fist to cover his nakedness, but was always too slow about it. The combat did not last long. Step after step, and they were long strides. Kay pressed forward. Was it a combat at all? There was no serious obstacle. Only a squeal from the secretary now and then. The Greek god squealed like a little girl being tickled, and finally he was gone. Kay was alone in a large space. He turned around in it, ready to fight, looking for his opponent, but there was no one there anymore. The company had left. Only the champagne glass lay on the ground, broken, and Kay trod it to pieces. But the broken glass stung, and he woke again with a start, feeling unwell like a small child who had been woken suddenly. All the same, at the sight of Bürgel's bare chest, an idea came to him from his dream. Here's your Greek god. Get him out of bed. However, said Bürgel, raising his face thoughtfully to the ceiling, as if seeking in his memory for examples, but failing to find any. All the same, in spite of all the precautionary measures, there is an opportunity for members of the public to exploit this nocturnal weakness of the secretaries, always supposing that it is a weakness for their own ends. To be sure, it is a very rare opportunity, or more accurately, I should say one that almost never comes. It consists in the arrival of the person concerned in the middle of the night, unannounced. You may be surprised that this happens so seldom, when it seems such an obvious thing to do. Well, you are not familiar with the way we go about things here, but you will have noticed the impenetrability of the official organization. However, that impenetrability in itself means that everyone who has any kind of request to make or must be examined on some subject for other reasons receives a summons at once, immediately, usually even before he has thought out his case. Why? Even before he knows about it. He will not be examined this time. Usually he won't be examined yet. Generally, the case has not reached that point, but he has the summons, which means that he can't turn up unannounced and thus entirely by surprise. At most, he can come at the wrong time, when the date and hour of his summons will be pointed out to him, and then, if he comes back at the right time, as a rule, he will be sent away, and there is no more difficulty. The summons in the member of the public's hand and the note in the files are weapons used by the secretaries, and if not always quite adequate, they are still strong